I got a phone call at the end of last week from Rabbi Yehoshua Hartman, who's sitting here, and he says, Ramosha, I'm going to be in the United States of America. And I said, okay, I got to grab the opportunity to sit down for a few minutes. Rabbi Hartman, as you may know, is the Machaber of the Blue Maharals. He'll tell you he didn't write the Maharal itself, but the Pirush on the bottom of, there are already a few dozen volumes of the Maharal, and it's not complete yet. And Rabbi Hartman also does a weekly Dvar Torah from the Gur Aryeh, from the Maharal, on all Parsha. So I took the opportunity, and I came here to sit down with Rabbi Yehoshua to schmooze and discuss. He has a fascinating life story and how he got to where he is today. Rabbi Yehoshua, how are you today?
Shalom Aleichem, great to be here. Good to see you, Ramesh. I'm here only for 48 hours, and it's great to spend 20% of it or whatever with you.
Wow, what a comment. Okay, people like to know from the beginning, from the crib. You were born in the United States.
Yes.
That's where you speak English.
Yes.
And although you lived for many years in Eretz Yisrael, and now you're living in London. So tell us, how did that transpire from the United States to Eretz Yisrael to London?
Okay, I was born in St. Louis, Missouri. My father, Rabbi Yehoshua Hartman, was a Rav in St. Louis. And in 1966, when I was 9 years old, we moved to Eretz Yisrael. It was a year before the 6-Day War, 10 months to be exact. Then Israel was literally a third world country. Like, mamish. I remember when you ordered a phone, they told you it takes 12 years till you get the phone. Could you imagine?
Oh, I can't imagine.
You go to someone and you order a phone in 12 years.
Okay.
And then came the 6-Day War, and that changed everything. And I was in Eretz Yisrael. That's why I went to yeshiva.
Why did your father decide to move to Eretz Yisrael?
It's really my mother, Zazan Kutenstag, who was alive and well. She just pushed us the whole time. And since I remember myself, we got to go to Eretz Yisrael. We got to go to Eretz Yisrael. And I asked my mother, Mommy, where did you get it from? Where did you get this drive to Eretz Yisrael?
She was an American or European?
Yeah. She was born when she came to America when she was 4.
Okay. So
But her parents lived their whole lives in America. Her siblings lived in America. Where did you get this drive to go to Eretz Yisrael? And she told me, I don't know, I was just born with it. And then one day, I learned the Reb Chaim Volozhin, the Ruach HaChaim, on Pirkei Avos, that says in Perek Hein Avos, the first Mishnah says, Asar Adoris mi Noach ad Avram, doesn't say Avram Avinu. Then the following Mishnah says, Asar Nisyonis Nisnasa Avram Avinu. The word Avinu is added on the later Mishnah. So says Reb Chaim Volozhin, because the first Mishnah is about the chronological order, so you don't have to say Avinu. But then it does say Avinu to bring out that the Nisyonis that Avram Avinu went through, like every father gives over his Yerusha, his wealth to his children, similarly also the Nisyonis of Avram Avinu. For example, says Reb Chaim Volozhin, it could be a Jew that wakes up one morning and has a burning drive to go to Eretz Yisrael. Where'd they come from? Avram Avinu's first son was Lech Lecha Me'artzecha, so some people are born with that, or they get it later on in their life from nowhere.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And the nowhere is Avram Avinu. And I remember when I learned that Reb Chaim Volozhin, I showed it to my mother, and I said, Mommy, Reb Chaim Volozhin spoke about you today. How could Reb Chaim Volozhin speak about me? This is sorry, but she has that drive, and till today, Baruch Hashem, my mother's almost 92. Every phone call, and I call up daily from London. No, when are you coming back? So she has a real love to Eretz Yisrael. And then, so we moved to Eretz Yisrael in 1966, and basically I was there for 40 years straight, excluding 1 year that we came back to America. For 1 year when my father had a sabbatical from his job in Israel. And that's where I met Rav Hutner Zatzal in Eretz Yisrael.
But you had a Shaykh Rav Hutner from before, so tell us, your father was a Talmud of Rav Hutner.
Yeah, my father was one of the outstanding Talmidim of Rav Hutner, Mamish. I remember Rav Hutner told me, and he illustrated, "Ani gidalti oto po." I raised him here. That's what he told him. He knew my father when my father was 12, and Rav Hutner then was 30, so I was a young man. And so always Rav Hutner was like the Zaidi in our house. Whenever there's a question, we ask the Rosh Hashiva.
So we don't have to jump to it now, but I'm assuming we'll talk about it soon. That your connection to Maharal came through Rav Hutner.
Zecher, for sure. Again, the first time that I met Rav Hutner, we spoke in Hebrew. He spoke Hebrew literally like an Israeli without any grammar mistakes. And he was allergic to grammar mistakes. And the first time
You have a good Meister there, Hutner.
What?
I'm interrupting you. You have a Meister the Hutner with the language.
Yeah.
With the language.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the first time I came on Al Das Atzmi, when I was 10, I came with my father, Alav Hashem. When I was 12, when I was 14. But then my father was nifter when I was 19, and somehow someone told me I should go speak to Rav Hutner. I don't remember who it was and who arranged the meeting. And I came into Rav Hutner the first time as an adult, called 19. And he took on as a Dover Pasha that I speak Yiddish. And then I didn't speak a word. Literally, not a word. Afterwards, I went to the mirror and I picked it up. But then I didn't speak a word. So I come in, I said, Shalom Aleichem, Famach Tetir. So I thought Famach Tetir is part of the bracha. Shalom Aleichem, Famach Tetir. So I said, he tells me, Famach Tetir. So I told him, V'chin Lamar. You should also be Zoicha one day to the Gewaltige Madrega of Famach Tetir. And then he said, Tegeh, Talom Debar Yiddish? Tizgor et Adelet. And then he said in Yiddish, I remember, Wie kann sein, as the Zun from HaRav Hartman read nicht Yiddish? Tizgor et Adelet. And since then we spoke in Hebrew. You see in the Pachad Yitzchak, he had a beautiful Hebrew. It's on the verge of poetry.
But it was something that he took pride in. And he wasn't happy that Yeshiva Bachrim didn't know the...
No, he told me once that Yeshiva Bachrim, they're illiterate in 3 languages. They don't speak English well, they don't speak Hebrew well, they don't speak Yiddish well. So they're illiterate in 3 languages. And then he told me that once he said this over to Yeshiva Bachar in America, that Yeshiva Bachar today are illiterate in 3 languages, and the Yeshiva Bachar said, Rosh Yeshiva, what does illiterate mean? What does it mean? So like his humor, and it was also a... I really have not seen someone so gebenched, so blessed like Rav Hutner Zatzal.
What do you mean?
Any mila that the human race has, I think he had. It could be it's very exaggerating. His go'iness, his pikchas, his geschmackheit, his ava to people, the yira that we had towards him, his kesher with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. I never saw such a blend of virtues in one individual, and I'm sure whatever I did see was just the tip of the iceberg, because he showed each Talmud what he wanted to show. He, like they say, if each Talmud would write a Sefer on Rav Hutner, it would be totally different svarim. Because he showed, I remember once I came over to him with a friend of mine. Why? Because I was then learning in the yeshiva in Itri in Eretz Yisrael, and I was telling my friends, after, each time was for 2-3 hours with Rav Hutner, and it was spiritual therapy. That's what it was. Mm-hmm. It's an experience, it's hard to explain. Ask Chaim Beliz, I'll tell you what it is. And I used to tell my friends, Rabbi say, you gotta know, it's hard to explain in words what I'm going through. So one of them told me, can I come? Or can I meet him? You're saying such nisim and influence? I said, listen, I'll ask the Rosh Hashiva. So I called him the Rosh Hashiva, and I asked him if a friend could come. And he said, yeah. And then the next time I came with a friend. And then, usually it was 2-3 hours each time. That time it was for 10 minutes. And Rav Hutner didn't speak a lot in those 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, he said, thank you for coming. So we left, and my friend tells me, you're a liar. You're saying these stories that are happening. I've been here for 10 minutes, nothing to report home about. I said, listen, I don't know what happened here. I'm telling you, I promise I'm telling you the emes. I don't know what happened here. The next time I came to Rav Hutner, so Rav Hutner asked me, do you understand what happened the previous time? That's what he asked me. I said, no. He says, I'll tell you, it was a misunderstanding. When you asked me if your friend could come, I said yes. But I meant he should come on his own. Mm-hmm. You understood to come with. Fine. I never speak to 2 people at the same time. Because what I want to say to Reuven, I don't want to say to Shimon. What I want to say to Shimon, I don't want to say to Reuven. Stam shmuzin, that's not my job. I don't do stam shmuzin.
Wow.
The sort of Adam Nivra Yechidi, and each person is a world on his own, that was, I think, one of the cornerstones of his whole attitude to Talmidim.
Wow.
And so that friend went afterwards on his own, and then he had his own kasher.
You got time. So you said you used to go, you had a weekly Chavrusa what you learned during those times? It
wasn't weekly, it was once every 3 weeks on a Thursday, I would have to call up. It wasn't a Chavrusa Shaf. Chavrusa Shaf means we're equals. We're not. I was 19.
You were learning a sefer?
No. I remember when I was a little bit older, when I was in my 20s, I said maybe I would have gotten more mileage on it if I would have learned with Rav Hutner. But we did learn here and there, but not from a sefer. But then later on in life, I said, I'm so happy that he spoke to me because I saw then his chokhmas chaim and his meaning the learning. Baruch Hashem, the early Yisrael you could learn with, maybe not the same level, but that's not my point. But his chokhmas chaim, I think it was really truly second to none. I remember once I told him with Torah on Hanukkah, and it was like 8-9 questions, and one Yesod that answered everything, and I was very proud of it. And the Yesod was that the Yevanim, not only we won, we beat them, that's Pasha, but they left a zero impact on us. And we came out, even when you win, you usually have casualties. Here it was clean, chalak. And according to that, I answered all 9 questions. And then when I finished, he told me, Rav Hutner, whatever you said now, not only it's not the truth, it's sheker v'chazav. And then he said, Universitat Bar Ilan hayom ze lo bigral hamisyamnim. And the whole tishtush that people have today in Ashkafis, isn't that because of the choshech of Yavan? And even the machloikas is in Chazal. He quoted the Mishnah Chagiga, which is the first machloikas. It was regarding smicha b'yom tov was because of Golus Yaman. So how could you say the Yevanim had the zero impact on us? On the contrary, the Kash is the opposite. They had such a terrible impact. What is there to celebrate? But then he told me, if you really want to understand what happened on Hanukkah, you should learn their mitzvah. And that's when he told me to start learning Maharal.
Okay, so perfect segue into Maharal. So we have today, how many volumes of Maharal complete?
Mitzvah Shem 40.
40. Wow. Ben Arboim Le, what does the Mishnah Pirkei Avos say? Labina. So I'm sure Maharal has, Ben Arboim Labina has what to say.
But once the Ger Chassid came to the Ger Rebbe and said, Ben Shishim Lezikna, I'm already old. He became 60.
Okay.
Ben Shishim Lezikna. So the Ger Rebbe told him, listen, it says Ben Arboim Labina. That didn't happen. So this also won't happen.
Anyway, so we're up to 40 volumes of Maharal. So you said the first time you had a shaykhs to Maharal was after that incident. And how'd that get you someone to be so proficient in working on the Maharal's forum? Did it just happen because Rav Hutner said one time to look at the Maharal?
No, so when Rav Hutner told me to learn Maharal, that's when I started to learn. Again, not kavua, but...
And by yourself or with the Chabura?
By myself.
Okay.
By myself. And then after he was nifter, and he was nifter, unfortunately, 10 days before my chasna. And I remember I asked myself, what would Rav Hutner want me to do? He probably want me really to get into Maharal in a serious way. So I did it really, Li'ilui Nishmasoi, and from my angle, so to speak, to keep on the kesher, even though he's not there. Whenever I have a kasha till today, even though it's already more than 40 years since his plira, whenever I have a kasha or a teretz, I ask myself, so what would the Rosh Yeshiva say? And I picture myself saying it over to him, and what do you think he would answer? And again, it could be, is it a healthy phenomenon or not? That we're going to have to ask the professionals. But I got into it. I started teaching Chumash Rashi I started teaching in the yeshiva Chumash Rashi, and then I went into the Gur Aryeh. That's a natural. And then once you go into the Gur Aryeh, you see it's just, and everything's already in the Gur Aryeh. That's
really
interesting.
You say the Gur Aryeh is the foundation?
It's the Sefer Yisod.
Sefer Yisod.
The Maharal refers to the Gur. It's the first Sefer the Maharal published. That's a fact.
Okay.
In 1578, it's the first Sefer that the Maharal published.
Okay.
The other Sefer were published afterwards. That and the Gvuras Hashem are called the Sefer Yisod of the Maharal.
Who coins it that?
He himself. The way he doesn't say the word Sifrei Yisod, but there's no other Sfarim that he quotes as much as he quotes those two.
As those two. So when you say you started learning it and going into it, you spent hours and hours a day. You took up chunks. I'm sure at different tekuvos in your life. You spent more time on it.
Whenever I had free time, I was focusing on the Maharal, and then Moshe Shapiro Zatzal would help me when I would get stuck. Mentioning, of course, Rabbi Yonis and David Shlita. When I had a kasha, there's a Yid in Bnei Brak called Rabbi Moshe Tzuriel, who's a Baki Nifla in Sifrei Maharal, alive and well till today, Baruch Hashem, till 120. And when I would get stuck, in the beginning, for sure, those three would help me, especially Rabbi Yonis and Abdul Mecham Rabbi Moshe. And then when I started publishing, I felt like I was only 29, 30 years old. So I asked Machon Yerushalayim if they're going to be willing to publish it.
What was the first thing you were publishing? The Goraya?
The Goraya.
Okay.
The Goraya. And they thought about it. They saw what I was doing, and they agreed with it. And
you did it all at once, all 5 halakim, or
no,
you did
no.
Bereshis?
In fact, even Bereshis, each chumash was divided to 2.
Right.
So I started in this was in 1989. That's when the first one came out. How many years ago is that?
We're in 2022 now. We just changed the calendar date. So is that how you started having a shaykhus with Moshe Shapiro?
No, I had shaykhus with Moshe also. That's a story on its own.
No, you mentioned that he's one of the people that used to go to talk Maharal.
Right.
In Shvarkait and Maharal.
Before that, a few months before that, I discovered Rabbi Moshe. He was giving secret chaburas in Yerushalayim. That's a story on its own. How I managed, Baruch Hashem, to get into that one. And he Goy Nifla. And he told me that Rabbi Moshe many times that there was his whole tashtit, his whole infrastructure, he got from the Maharal. That's what he said. And he told me there was no one who opened up the world of Chazal, not before or after, like the Maharal did.
Wow.
So the Maharal is considered the Even Yesoid for this Maharal of Torah from the Beis HaMedrash of the Goyim, even though the Gra himself never quotes the Maharal, but his Talmidim do.
So very quickly, we're not going to make this a discussion on the Maharal because we could talk for 3 weeks on the Maharal, at least, or 3 years on the Maharal. For a regular person, what does the Maharal bring to his life?
Purpose, meaning, Birkas Hanenin. As a 5-year-old, you understand that it's like going to the candy man in shul and saying, "Can I please get a candy?" And can I please get a candy, pretty please, with sugar on? And then you grow up, you say, "No, that's not what a Birkas Hanenin is." You're not saying, "Can I please eat the apple?" That's not the bracha. The bracha is acknowledging that Kodesh Baruch Hu created the apple. So for a 5-year-old, that's wonderful. But once you grow up, hey, that's not Birkas Hanenin. And then you learn the Maharal, a few places that says Birkas Hanenin, the Gemara says is a pidyon. It's offering a substitute. Namely, everything in the world is praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Akol bar l'chvoidai. And the apple is also praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the chokhmah of every apple. And because you're hungry, you're not allowed to cut short the praise and the shira of the apple. But if you come with your das and your koach hadibur, and you offer a substitute and a shvach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu creating the apple, then the apple could retire. And now you could have it.
Wow, fascinating. So I'll have to say that Nachi Weinstein had an interview with you, and there you discussed more how you wrote the Sefer and what went into the writing of the Sefer, and the longer versus the shorter. You discussed a lot of those things with him, and Kedai, people want to understand the tzur of how the Maharal was, how you worked on the Maharal Svarim, to listen to that podcast.
But I just would like maybe just to finish the sentence I said before. The Maharal is the father of the Torah Sagra and the Torah of the Chasidus.
That's an interesting statement.
Yeah, the Rav Kook Zatzal said that he is the Avi of the Goyen and his Beis HaMedrash and the Baal Shem Tov and his Beis HaMedrash.
Meaning both of their ideas and ideals can be found traced back to the Maharal.
Absolutely. On this, maybe I could add what Hutner once told me. When you hear the name Baal Shem Tov and Goyen, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Machlekes. What was the main focus of the Goyen? What did he focus on in his life? Torah. In just a minute. What was the Baal Shem Tov focusing on? Simcha.
Okay.
Now it's known when big people are nifter, that means they finish their tafkid.
Okay.
The Goyen was nifter on Sukkot, which is Man Simchaseinu. And the Baal Shem Tov was nifter on Shavuos 48 years earlier, which is Man Matan Torasenu. Each one was nifter on Yenim Yom Tov. The Goyen is Man Simcha, and the Baal Shem Tov is Man Torah. This is what Rav told me once. So I asked him, what does the Rosh want to say? He said, Tachshov Levad. But I think what he was trying to say is that Ba'oimek Sheba'oimek, maybe there's not such a great machlokes there. When the Goyen said Torah, he meant without Simcha. Could you learn Torah without Simcha? The Arevna, it's like eating without an appetite. And when the Baal Shem Tov said happy, it was just the emptiness, happy clappy, just to be happy stam.
Okay.
So Ba'oimek, maybe they're not so far away from each other. That's what I think he was saying. And he personified these two approaches, so it's very matif for him to say that.
Right. So as someone who I can't say I'm someone who learns Maharal often, but now that I've gotten to know you over the past couple of years, it's something that I'm focused on more. So when you open up any one of your volumes, you see the amount of other Maharals, other Maharal that you take into. What's the English word for take into? What's the English word for?
Parallel, maybe, or
parallel, or you
cross-reference.
Cross-reference, exactly. So I guess my Yiddish and my English. So one wonders, I've talked about this on camera. Is it something now that you have all Maharal, Sif Maharal, Psuchim Lefanecha? You go through one Maharal over here and you're able to say, okay, I could quote the whole Maharal over here in this sefer and the other one in that sefer.
On Divrei Torah, it said, Divrei Torah ani b'mkomam v'ashirim b'mokom acher. It's a Yerushalmi.
Right.
That is specifically relevant to the Maharal Svarim. Whenever he says a word once, he said it also elsewhere in different kind of ways.
Okay.
So that's a but it's a yam. It's a yam. It's like the person that knows not lahavdil shas. So now, whenever he learns shas, every time he sees the Gemara, what does he do? Okay, it helps to know other Maharals.
So before you started writing, you knew all the Maharals before you started writing the first, after your Goraya, right? You're quoting from everywhere. And then what do you write after Goraya?
After Goraya came Netzach.
And Netzach you're quoting from all the other ones.
But of course, as time went on, I was going deeper and deeper into it. So when I look now what I did in the Goraya, I'm not that thrilled.
You can redo it.
In fact, I'm planning to do it.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
It's for sure, Breishis. Be'ezer Hashem.
Ezer Hashem. Announced here for the first time.
OU will publish the first Goraya.
Breaking news. Anyway, there's one thing that I always hear, I've heard from you a few times, that you're contemplating writing Maharal for, lahavdil. It comes because people always like to know, we're talking about Maharal, talk about the Golem. Was there a Golem? Wasn't there a Golem? And what do you say?
I asked once Rav Hutner Zatzal if there was one, and he did not give me a clear answer. Meaning, it's not clear. I don't think you can say a definite yes or a definite no.
Okay, so Golem in English is a dummy. Right? So that's how we get to this conversation.
Right.
The world who's not living in the world of Maharal needs some kind of handbook, right?
Yes.
Right. So what's the line that you say?
It's a joke.
It's a joke. Yes.
Maharal for dummies. That would be maybe a goal one day.
Maharal for Golems, we could call it in Lashon Kodesh.
Lashon Kodesh. Right.
But the idea is that most of the world, and I think the world is growing to appreciate Maharal and to learn Maharal, but most of the people are just like scared. They stand back, they open it up and they don't know how to connect to it. So there might be a tachlis and we could call it something else. But in putting something out. Absolutely.
Especially maybe also to do it in English. There's definitely a need, and Rabbi Shapiro told me many times that the Maharal wrote his Torah not for his door. His door maybe did not yet understand him. It's for Shpetetik doors before Mashiach comes, which is, they say, it's our door. And absolutely there's a need to not to bring down the Maharal, but to make him more accessible to people. I think that's something that should be done. In fact, I have another idea that Rabbi Moshe Zatzal told me to do, is to write the Maharal afterwards when I finish on mitzvahs, the Maharal on tefillin, beautiful shtiklachs, the Maharal on tzitzis, the Maharal on Shabbos. He was planning to write a sefer on Shabbos, which we don't have, but he wrote enough about Shabbos here and there. So that in Yetz Hashem will also be...
this could be something how the world could take on the Maharal and relate to it in some kind of framework of how you go through your day. Right? Like you get up in the morning, you make a bracha, you wash Negelwasser, Moida'ani, Tefillin, Tzitzis.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the Chidush HaGodes of the Maharal according to the Seder HaDaf would also be another way how to access Maharal. You're learning now a Daf Yomi, whatever. What does the Maharal say on these Gemaras?
So Rabbi Hartman, meanwhile you're on all Parsha. Maybe you want to start doing on all Daf. Maharal on the Daf. So let's get to all Parsha for a second. We could sit here for hours and schmooze, but Rabbi Hartman didn't come to America for 48 hours to talk to me for all the time. So tell the audience, what do you do on All Parsha every week?
All Parsha is to take a concept of the Maharal, usually in the Gur Aryeh, but lav dafka, but usually in the Gur Aryeh.
This week it was Buras Hashem, Parshas Bay, which is a sefer which you said was written.
It's on Inyanei Pesach.
Inyanei Pesach.
And a lot of it's Parshas Bay, 100%. And to take one idea, one concept within 15, 20 minutes, and to show niflois how the Maharal really takes things which we always took till now for granted, but like going a little bit deeper into it. Why Makkah's Purim was the only Makkah that we had to do something to be saved? We had to do a Korban Pesach not to be hit. The previous 9 Makkahs, we had to do nothing and we were saved. Makkah's Purim, we were also saved, but not automatically. Why is that different? What happened in Makkah's Purim that suddenly now we're released? What happened? Because you just can't go on forever, so you got to stop at some point, or maybe there's something intrinsic that happened at that after Makkah's Purim. The idea that we ate, that we're focusing on the food that we ate coming out of Mitzrayim, is that really that important? But the whole theme of Pesach became the matzah. There's a chiyuv kares if someone eats chametz. Why is he getting chametz? For what? Not commemorating the fact that we left Egypt in a hastiness? For that he deserves to die?
Right.
These basic questions that when you go through the Sefer Maharal, you start saying, hey, it's a lot more than what meets the eye.
How come I never thought of this?
And how come, that's always the question. How come we never thought? And like these kind of issues of Korban Pesach, that's what we were doing that night. Hours and hours being engaged in Korban Pesach on the night that we were born. Why was that so important? To be doing Korban Pesach. And the Korban Pesach is the only Korban that the Torah calls it Avoida on its own right. There's no other mitzvah in the Torah, not only Korban, which is called Avoida. Only Korban Pesach. These are questions that the Maharal asks. For example, the stones under the head of Yaakov Avinu became one because they were fighting. And Baruch said, stop fighting, and they became one. Could you explain this to intelligent Jew, from or not from, what's happening here?
Right.
So for a 5-year-old, you could say, yeah, that's what happened. But when you grow up a little bit, could stones fight? Did this happen with Yaakov Avinu every night that he went to sleep? And how can we only find this by Yaakov? Why not by Abraham, Yitzchak, Moshe, Aaron? So these are questions that the Maharal asks, and he starts making you think and understanding that every chazal, every single chazal in the world is the most deepest geschmacka idea that you could think of. And you just got to know how to unleash what's there.
Amazing. So just to wrap it up, for the yeshiva guy in me, and probably in you, the world thinks the Maharal's machshava. But the Maharal was a lot more than just the machshava sefer, right?
The Maharal was a goin oilam in all shitchei Torah. I found recently that the Taz, who lived not so much after the Maharal, 50 years after the Maharal, writes on him in Yoredea Siman Kufkav Gimel, Gdol Hador, or Gdol Ha'olam, he calls the Maharal, Gdol Ha'olam. In Halacha, the issue there was Yain Nesach. He's quoted, when it comes to the Inyani Halacha, he's quoted a lot. The Magen Avraham and all the poskim quote him. I remember once I gave Rabbi Yosef a volume of one of the Maharals, and he told me, I asked him, how's the Maharal considered in psak?
Where would you find Maharal's psak?
In Verse Hashem, he talks about in Matzah Shira, Arba Koises, and so on. Ner Mitzvah, about Ner Chanukah, and here and there. And he did have a commentary on Tur, which some publishers have it till today there. And he told me, and then he started quoting places that Maharal's quoted by the Magen Avraham and the Shach and others.
Wow.
And then when he finished, he said, after 2 minutes, and not at all, Chas V'Shalom in the Gaivadik away, I quoted over now for you over 40 places.
Wow.
So he was considered the Pesach Ador, the Bach, who was the Shver of the Taz. It's totally misbatel to the Maharal. And we're speaking in Yanei Halacha. And then in Lumdis, I once had I was traveling together with the Rosh Hashiva of Brisk, Rabbi Yehoshua Soloveitchik. And I told him a word of the Maharal in Kochim. And he was Yoitze Min HaKelim. He said, who says that? The Maharal. The Maharal, he printed together with Rabbi Mizrahi and the Sifsei Chacham. He wanted to make sure we're speaking about the same Gurarye. And I said, yeah. And he was Yoitze Min HaKelim. And then I told him another word of the Maharal in Kochim. And he said, it's mamish. He says, next time, whenever you have a word like that of the Maharal, please come tell me.
Wow. And asking if the Maharal's printed with Sifsei Chacham is like asking if the Maharal's printed with Sifsei Chacham is asking, like...
The Meshmedish that we come from is like saying, oh, the Maggid Mishnah is printed together with the Mari Kukus. Oh, very nice. That's the Besmodish of Chaim Berlin.
Yes. Okay, gewaldig. So, shkoyach for sitting down and schmoozing. Maybe you want to tell people your email address if they have any ha'aros on all parsha, if they want to reach out to you, but any...
With pleasure. I did it the last time I was interviewed. My email address is JD, that stands for Joshua David. JD Hartman, Hartman, 120 @gmail.com. Every email will be Belina answered.
And Mitzvah Hashem, let's hope that we could have Rabbi Hartman perhaps presenting on the mitzvahs, the sefer that he wants to write. Perhaps we could get together and put a chabura together. I'm sure many people will be interested in hearing how the Maharal understands the mitzvahs hayom and gives you the why, right? That's what the Maharal gives you. The why you yid.
The chachma.
The
chachma on every mitzvah. On every mitzvah, the Torah it says, Kihi chochmaschem uvinasem.
Gewaldig. Okay, Yashakayach, Rabbi Hartman.
It's a pleasure seeing you, Rabbi Moshe, and keep on your avodas hakodesh and abatzas Torah and all parsha, all Mishnah, and Mitzvah Hashem, Michael al Chayil.
Amen.